I thought the light was green. I hit the gas and boom, there was nothing. I was in a black abyss, with a floor but no walls, no sounds, no smells, no people, no anything. The oblivion. Nothing. It was the end. Sort of like Iowa. Its never-ending ocean of corn except pitch black. I exist, but nothing else did. Meaninglessness. Then, like a mirage in the desert, I began to see the flames, and the floor began to move like I was on a giant rotary belt. But I'm not the only one. Now there were millions of all of us standing single file, headed for what looked like the sun. Some turned around and tried to escape, but most of us just accepted our fate. Slowly, steadily, we approached the gates, where a man with a sharp suit and a clipboard, pen poised, stares at me, with two demons who are having a cigarette break. One of the demons opened up the gates, and the rotary belt ended like a cliff. And at that harvest time, we all fell and piled up like grains in this brightly lit cave of nowhere, sitting on a reservoir of doomed spirits, waiting for nothing, because whatever awaited us would last for an eternity. Above us flew millions of evil fairies, dropping little balls of flame on top of our heads. A dark figure stepped out from the walls of fire, grabbing me and pushing me down the hill of bodies into the seething landscape, ripping and shredding my consciousness. Rolling to the bottom into a sea of boiling mud, deep enough to be drowned in it. A really big, fat fish jumped out at me. Some squealing pigs ran by that were being chased by little demons with knives. Bones were sticking out of some solid ground. A stampede of spiders started heading right for me. I crawled out of the molten mud only to be greeted by millions of tiny David Hasselhoff clones wielding messy hamburgers made of hot tar and squirrels filled with gasoline. One of them yelled up at me, "There are dying children out there whose last wish is to meet me." And they all started lighting the tails and launching the squirrels and hot tar hamburgers right at me. I tried to dodge them, but the skin of my arms got seared off by the flames. I began to crawl when I noticed I was at the feet of the cartoon Satan from South Park. And standing next to him was the real Michael Jackson, who had a can of gasoline and was asking the cartoon Satan where the children were. A well-dressed Saddam Hussein was standing next to me. He turned to me and gave a slight smile that only a person who'd lived a life of murder and greed could give, when tears of blood started flowing from his eyes as he burst into flames. To the right of me was Kevin Costner and Axl Rose, who were in some sort of circle jerk contest with Motley Crue. There were hookers and hookahs and disco balls. To my left was Artie Lang, and he was pulling off his goatee. That's sad. Suddenly, from behind them, a gigantic anus-faced monster with gnarly, rusty metal teeth and a long, prehensile tongue started biting off their heads. I jumped to my feet and backed away. The walls were covered with millions of giant TV screens stacked on top of each other, all with the hills playing simultaneously. And there were smaller TVs in smaller piles with footage of old hack jacking off in heaven and others with him condescendingly explaining to anyone who was watching why they were in hell. I turned around, and there he was. The devil, staring up at me with a grin mocking me for rejecting the one true God. He had Elvis on his knees in front of him, sucking his cock, Elvis's ass bubbling out of his white leather pants. Behind the devil was a gigantic torso with a tremendous pregnant belly and two huge breasts. Below him, an enormous vagina, spewing blood in all directions and making disgusting gurgling sounds. The devil had a magic wand, and he used it to turn his nipples into dicks that started shitting all over Elvis's head. Bloody, slimy tentacles started bursting from all my crevices. Finally, I became fed up with the constant attack and looked up to give a punch only to see myself giving me the same angry look right back at me. But then in an instant, I was back on Earth. The same exact world that existed before, but this time, forever. Only everything was even lamer, if that were even possible. Here, to live forever, praying for death. But death won't come, as the old cliche goes. Wow. Sorry if it's not as polished as I would normally like to present, but I did want to read it for the first time, right here. And who would send me this horrible story? Blocked.